We've got open phones today. Then we have a medical doctor who's an expert on cell phone radiation, who was in CBS News last week warning of the dangers of brain cancer associated with it, saying keep your phone off unless you're using it because it's constantly radiating one way or another. She's going to be joining us at the bottom of the next hour. But we'll have open phones throughout this hour up until the second half of the third hour. Your phone calls are coming up. Mike and Renee and Corey and Steve and Chris. We're going to get to everybody. The toll-free number to join us, wide open phones, 800-259-9231 on any issue or any question or comment that you have. Now I'm not trying to scare people with this, and it may not be anything. I want to be clear about that. But if you remember, just back on August 4th, a little over a month and a half ago, Major General Harold J. Green, the highest-ranking U.S. military officer, not just Army officer, to ever be killed in 240 years of U.S. history, was shot dead by an Afghan soldier inside of a secure base. And if you look at the casualty list that I've sit there and track in the news, former Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs served in Afghanistan and was actually wounded there repeatedly, so he can speak to this better than I. But most of the time when it's really a fatal bombing or mass shooting, it's an Afghan National Guard or Afghan regular army, and a lot of times it's an officer that does it. And they'll go into a base, they'll blow it up, they'll go into a CIA base, they'll blow it up. And just last month, this general got shot dead with some other people by this individual. So one of the biggest casualty groups out there are these Afghan soldiers. And we're always told, oh, they're all completely safe. It's a great winning policy. Don't worry, it's no big deal. Even though the military for a decade has been saying this isn't working. All this is doing is getting us killed. The Afghan military just doesn't want us here. We want to go home, A. B, if you're going to keep us here, we don't want these soldiers in our base, okay, period, because that's one of the highest casualty numbers they have. Now, just last week, and Joe Biggs is going to go over this, 2 Afghans that were over here as part of this program came up missing. Now they say that they have been found inside the United States in Buffalo. That's just broke on WIVB New York Channel 4. Separately, we have NBC News reporting on this just an hour ago. Now it's suddenly breaking on Google News, CBS News. It's suddenly breaking all over the place right now. Police searching for missing Afghan soldiers on Cape Cod. 3 Afghanistan Army National Guard soldiers, or excuse me, not National Guard, National Army soldiers, who went missing on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The soldiers have been at Joint Base Cape Cod since September 11th. They say there's been a lot of speculation, including that they may be trying to defect. Defect to who? They're already here. No reason to think they have nefarious intent, said Massachusetts State Police Superintendent Colonel Timothy Albin. Massachusetts National Guard says there's no threat to the public at this time because the soldiers were vetted by a wide variety of agencies before they were brought into the United States. Well, here's the problem with that. They supposedly vetted all the people to fight Assad, and none of them were al-Qaeda, when we all know almost all of them were. Flying Wahhabist flags day one. Our government put them in Libya, tried to put them in Iraq, tried to put them in for destabilization in Egypt. So the State Department and people trying to act like we didn't know there was al-Qaeda. Now their name's ISIS or ISIL or IS. It's all to confuse people. And I know I harp on this. Rand Paul, the senator, is exposing it. Senator Ted Cruz is exposing it. And I'm proud of the fact this broadcast the last few years has been the genesis or the zenith, the flashpoint for forcing this out there so we can have a real debate about what's really happening. Because any way you slice it, radical, jihadist, Islamicist, Wahhabist, nutbaggery is a real threat to the entire world and is being fueled by criminal elements in our military-industrial complex and foreign banking combine that want to be able to take our freedoms here at home by pointing their finger at this group of head-chopping scum. Now, if I see one report, I get a little suspicious of people disappearing. I see two reports, I want to know what they're doing bringing Afghan soldiers in here when they have such a track record of attacking with car bombs, you name it. They want to set up checkpoints all over D.C. now to, quote, keep the White House safe. No, it's to train us to live in North Korea. But let me tell you, the southern and northern borders are wide open, and they're bringing jihadis in, and they're protecting them. Now, I'm not saying this last group or this new group are terrorists. Sure, they're nice people. What I am saying is they belong to a military, that the Afghan national military, that from the numbers I've seen is the number 2 group killing coalition or U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. Now, Joe Biggs has been shot and bombed and blown up in APCs by these guys, so he can give us his take on it and correct me if I'm wrong, but I had Colonel Schaefer on, who ran the Army program against al-Qaeda for 10 years, could have killed bin Laden twice. That's come out in congressional testimony. And he said, no, the numbers are way above 65% being al-Qaeda. It's more like 95%. Well, he said he couldn't say, but it was way over 65. Then a little bird told me 95. So we'll just leave it at that. But he'd been at Congress briefing them that day. So they all know this, Joe. First, big picture, what's your take on these Afghan soldiers, period, bringing them into the U.S.? And then my concern is the globalists could even bring them in and let them go as patsies and then blame them and set them up for something later. I mean, there's no telling. The Zarnev brothers were clearly set up in a false flag, clearly patsies in a larger operation at the Boston bombing. I had a former top CIA analyst and Black Ops on-the-ground commando, Steele, just Friday, saying the same stuff. I mean, anybody that studies this can see it. What's your take, Joe Biggs?
Well, these aren't just regular soldiers. These are 3 ANA, Afghan National Army officers, 1 major, 2 captains. So these are officers in the Afghan Army now out in the streets. We know we have sleeper cells out there. Maybe they need some commanding behind it. You know, that's a big concern. You know, in my time in Afghanistan, my little base I lived on, I had to share a compound with the Afghan National Army. And you have to sleep with one eye open, literally, because there were numerous times these guys would come up to my soldiers and threaten to kill them. And I had to go out on one instance I'll never forget, and I put a grenade launcher in this guy's face, and I said, hey, if you ever threaten one of my soldiers again, I'm going to blow your head off. And then the interpreter came over, and I was like, you need to interpret what I'm saying. He's like, no, I'm not. So I pulled out my sidearm, and I'm sitting there holding 2 guns. I'm like, you need to tell him what's going to happen if he threatens one of my guys again. So you don't know who they're bringing in. They bring in all kinds of people, and people are like, well, no one has that much patience. That's all they have in Afghanistan is patience. They sit around and wait and wait and wait and wait to strike. They have no problem doing that. They are a very patient group of people. And to sit there and make their way in the ranks and then get into a U.S. Army base and to start assassinating people, it's very probable. It happens all the time.
Major Hassan waited 2 years before he did anything.
Yeah. They have tons of patience. That's what people need to get through their head. When something like this happens, like you said, it may or not, it could be something, it could not. But it's definitely something to take consideration. And it's something I hope they can find, get pictures up on TV and look for these guys, because that's a very shady thing. They bring them in September 11th, and now they lose them at a mall. Why were they allowed to be at a mall to just wander off?
Well, I mean, it may just be that, hey, America is a lot better than, you know, Afghanistan. I haven't been there, but I've watched the videos. You've lived it. I mean, so maybe that's what's happening. Probably great guys. But statistically, Afghan National Army, from what I've seen, is the number 2 cause of death right over there for U.S. soldiers. So it's not like we're being conspiracy theorists here saying, wow, this is troubling.
Yeah, we caught 2 Afghan Army guys in placing IEDs to kill us just 2 miles down the road from our compound. We actually were sitting there driving down the road, and I was like, hey, isn't that a guy that works with us? And he's sitting there digging, and then looks up and they scatter off. And I'm like, that's the guy that lives with us. Really? I mean, you can't trust him at all. That's a scary thing, because these guys should be watched 24/7 by armed guards. To let this happen, that just blows my mind.
Well, why not train them at a foreign military base? What are they doing training them in the U.S.?
Well, see, the thing they're going to say, though, is we've been bringing in foreign troops forever. Well, we bring in German troops. We bring in stuff like that. We bring in other allies. But this is different because, like you said, the track record isn't good with them. We know they defect. We know they turn on people and they shoot them. Like you said, that general was killed. That's the highest ranking military person killed by one of these Afghan soldiers who just waited for that right time and took it.
And then meanwhile, they've got the state police, everybody going, oh, there's no problem. Nothing's going on. It's ridiculous. Everything's fine. Well, then I want to be treated like I'm not a terrorist then when I pull up to some checkpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm tired of this, man.
Well, it's funny because they said they vetted him. Like, what is their vetting process? Because their vetting processes haven't worked thus far. You know, I've got friends who have been shot, who have been killed by these guys before. And as you can see, I get blood red talking about it. I don't trust them whatsoever as far as I can throw them. The fact that they bring them into our country and they're not even watching them and they're allowing this, and this is the second time, that's crazy. You know, our borders are open. We're creating these groups so we can topple these other regimes. You know, there's another huge terrorist group right now that they're calling Khorasan. That's the next big group. And the reason they're bad is because the guy who leads it has links to Al-Qaeda, and most of his guys have passports to Western countries.
You can just feel a big terror attack coming. I feel it.
Well, they want something. They want Syria bad. These guys are out of Syria. They want Syria. They want Assad.
I want to come back and hear about this new group that's got the U.S. passports. And again, we're not saying the whole government's going to let this happen, but criminal elements at the top over and over again do this. And then the government won't even get in trouble for letting us get attacked. When it happens, they'll get more of our freedoms.
That's all they want.
I mean, this is ridiculous, folks. It's ridiculous. We'll be right back, and then your phone calls are coming up. Stay with us. Former Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs is in studio with us, one of our reporters. And we're going over the fact that Afghan National Army officers, 3 of them, a major and 2 captains, have come up missing. And this is a group that's well known to attack and to basically operate as sleeper cells. We're not saying these guys are that. We're just saying they come from a group chock full of it. And then, Joe, you were bringing up this new group they're talking about. I mean, it's just jihadis are activating all over the world right now. And then, meanwhile, I saw a story over the weekend on NBC News. Breitbart had it as well, where you can't have an American flag at your university because it might offend someone. People need to say no to all this. This political correctness is killing this country. And I'm not somebody that's a, quote, Islamophobe, because it's true. I've studied the demographics of the Middle East. Most countries just want to live in peace. They want to have a job and be left alone. But the jihadis out of Saudi Arabia and other areas are being funded and turned loose to run wild. And then we're not even supposed to criticize them, Joe.
It's crazy. I've been to so many countries around this world, and they all wave their flags proudly. And if you were to bring in a flag of another country and wave it around, that would be very offensive to them. Meanwhile, here in America, when we want to wave our own flag and we want to have pride for our country, we're looked at like terrorists. I mean, what have we come to where you can't walk up and down the streets waving an American flag or hang one from your apartment complex without someone threatening to kick you out?
Well, obviously, the flag's been used for a bunch of corruption, but it doesn't mean that the flag symbolizes that. For me, it symbolizes the Bill of Rights, Constitution, Second Amendment, national sovereignty, our amazing history, when stacked up to other countries, is exceptional. But the leftists are attacking it because they want us to adopt their new globalist ideology. But just look at how they lecture us. You can't have an American flag at public school. It's offensive. You can't have an NRA shirt, but we can teach jihadi garbage in the public schools. Talk about this new terror group.
All right, so a new article out in The Independent came out talking about a shadowy group of extremists with links to Al-Qaeda as big as a threat as the Islamic State. Basically, what they're saying is they have a huge expertise in making bombs, coupled with the presence of jihadist fighters with Western passports in its ranks. You know, that's what makes it a very significant threat to the homeland right now.
And the name of the new group?
Khorasan, Khorasan.
We have articles and video where in Turkey, they let ISIS ride around with their weapons on the trains when nobody else can own guns. They let them travel freely. England's letting them fly back and forth. It's so clear the West is helping these guys.
Well, this is the thing, though. From a military aspect, that huge convoy we've seen videos of where ISIS is coming into Iraq and their vehicles are butt to butt. They've got all this military equipment they've stolen, U.S. military equipment. That is something you don't do when you have military knowledge. All right, so when you do a convoy with military, you have spacing. So if someone hits you with a mortar, whatever, some kind of air asset, it only takes out one vehicle. These guys they know that no one's going to mess with them. That's why they're riding bumper to bumper. Because like I said, with that convoy leading into Iraq, we could have taken out all of ISIS in a couple airstrikes and been done with it. The fact that we knew that they were doing that and we did nothing about it, and they're just on a remote road where there would be no collateral.
Well, now we've confirmed they've got Chevy trucks fitted in Texas for U.S. Special Forces. It's been given to them. They didn't just steal it out of bunkers.
Well, they've got brand new Toyota Hilux short bed trucks. I mean, they've got tons of new toys now. I mean, they picked up what is it? 198 howitzers. They've gotten anti-aircraft stuff. They've got all of our Humvees, tanks. Anybody goes and walks into a base and tries to drive a tank is not going to be able to do it. You know, the fact that these guys are, you know that the government has something to do with it because they wouldn't even know how to operate that stuff. You know, I know a buddy, it took him 6 months to even learn how to actually shoot a 198, much, you know, let alone be a part of an entire artillery section to learn every position there at the gun. So
it's incredible. It's a whole science.
Yeah, it is. It takes some people a lifetime to master. And I've got a lot of buddies in artillery who pride themselves in that. So the fact that these guys are able to just hop in and take these pieces and then use them and put them in play, you know that there's military U.S. backing in there.
Well, they trained them. That was the big controversy the last few years in Jordan, in some bases in Iraq, and in Turkey. And now they're just pouring in. What do you think the end game is?
We want to go to Syria. We want to take out the Assad regime. We need bad guys like ISIS, Islamic State, ISIL, whatever, Khorasan, to give us reasons to go. And like I said, it's always that humanitarian means. Because last time with the Assad, it was the chemical attacks. Now we have the Ebola thing in Africa. They also want to bring these guys into America. You know, once you get people scared enough at home, they're going to be like, the government's going to go like, see, look, all this bad stuff happens if you don't have us.
That's it. That's exactly what's happening.
And then now we can go get these bad guys. You know,
That's
and all
right.
these new ISIS propaganda videos that are coming out, that doesn't just you get these young impressionable Muslims to want to arm up and go fight.
Makes our military want to get bigger.
Want to get.
I hear you. I hear you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Edward Groot. Today I'd like to talk about the war on women. You've experienced and heard about the benefits of super male vitality. Now, the new formula has arrived. Introducing the new Super Female Vitality. I have specifically designed this formula to help the body naturally regulate itself without the use of artificial hormones. Key ingredients chosen from the highest quality sources. Each of these ingredients works synergistically with the female body in order to maximize overall vitality. You've heard the reviews and the feedback on how the original Super Male Vitality has revitalized relationships. Now, both the man and the woman can have the revitalization in their own bodies with Super Male Vitality and Super Female Vitality. Secure your Super Female Vitality today from our limited stock at InfoWarsLife.com.
Well, the White House says the intruders that have tried to sneak in, one dressed up like a Pokemon character, the other a veteran, a homeless veteran, did not mean any harm, but nevertheless, the Secret Service is being quoted today by the Associated Press saying snipers, guards, fences, not enough. Secret Service moles security checkpoints down the road from the White House, or internal checkpoints on the highways, on the roads around the White House in Washington, D.C. You only see stuff like that in North Korea. And I guess in like Turkmenistan or something. Of course, you only see black uniforms and cameras and checkpoints in a country that's been taken over by criminals. And folks will say, but ISIS is going to strike us. I got an article here where They stopped the plane, pulled people off, freaked out. Here's the headline, Infowars.com. Feds swarm plane, interrogate passenger over travel group logo that resembled ISIS. So they will freak out over something that clearly has nothing to do with Islamic radical terrorism, while our government arms the very rebels to fight the very rebels. So it's this schizophrenic government where they act like they're keeping you safe by taking your liberties while publicly funding the terrorist. Now, that doesn't mean everyone in the government obviously is involved in this. You've got one hand trying to do something while the other hand's creating the crisis. But it's usually the low-level people that are trying to actually go after extremists, terrorists, whatever you want to call it. And then it's the folks on top shepherding it, protecting it, opening the door for it. So that's coming up today. Also, Obama's UN ambassador admits fight against ISIS designed to take out Assad in Syria. What an amazing admission that we're going to arm the good rebel group so they can take out ISIS. And then what's that rebel group want to do? They want to take out Assad. So it's so over-the-top deceptive, I have trouble even unraveling it because it's so open. It's like a giant elephant in your living room. You open the door, your front door, and there's a giant elephant sitting there, and you can't speak. But it's obvious. It's over the top. It's ridiculous. This is the absurdistness, the absurdist nature of this makes it really hard to even fathom how ridiculous it is. But Senator Rand Paul and others are out there exposing it, and that is certainly a good thing. So we're going to talk about that as well. Also, UK's Cameron shifts tack. That's the way for lying. UK's Cameron shifts tack like he's out sailing. And when you change positions 180 degrees, well, that's not lying. It's changing tack. He's tacking. Oh, that sounds kind of elegant and gentlemanly, and he should be wearing a little captain hat like Judge Smales, christening the boat the Flying Wasp, the flying wagon of horse manure. UK's Cameron shifts tack. They had promised that if they voted to stay in the UK, they would give new powers, and they had demonstrated those. They had listed those, that the UK would turn loose of some of its powers. Now he says, no, I meant more power for England. I mean, just incredible, the screw job that these people will carry out. But the public is ignorant. But then what were they going to do if they didn't stay in the UK? The socialists were going to loot Scotland. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. That's all coming up and a lot more. Stay with us. Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?